That was kind of crazy. I stepped on a coral snake. Ooh, coral snake. But most importantly, this video is actually about Me Too and a series of videos about Me Too and what to do if you're a man, if you're a sexual man, if you want to date women in a Me Too era and not get your career ruined, not have your life drugged through the fires of social hate. But really to gain some awareness on how to be a better man. But in this particular video, we're actually going to be talking about understanding trauma, understanding sexual trauma, trauma with women, and trauma also with men when it comes down to sex. Basically, if you're a sexual man, check out this series, check out the playlist. That's pretty much what we do here. As if you don't know me, I'm Steve Mayeda. I've been a men's coach for the last 12 years of my life. And we thrive off of groups and communities and really amazing stuff. I'm also the founder of Austin Men's Development as well as The Sexual Life. If you're a man looking for excellence and want a community of guys dedicated to that, well, check out the links down below. There's MD Excellence, where this podcast was actually recorded when we go to the studio. And then there's also a bunch of free stuff in the free stuff link down below. So let's go on to the studio and let's talk about Me Too. So, we're a men's group. We wanted to talk about Me Too and dating in the Me Too world, or at least I wanted to get to that, and we probably will get to that. But in all of this, there's a discussion that's going on with women. It's not going on with men that we as men at least need to be somewhat aware of. And see, this is where it's like men and women are different from each other in many ways, and we're similar in even more ways, and we do need to come together. We do need to interact with one another. But there's certain things where women got to talk. They got to have their time. And I have a men's group. There's a men's group going on right now on our call, and we as men need to talk. This is sacred to us that we as men can talk freely as men. It's very, very important. But there's a discussion that is happening going on with women, or more than that, or there's a movement, there's a phenomenon, all these different things where a lot of women are talking about sexual assault. And I'm not here to say that I know anything about it, right? Or that I can be an authority on that. But one thing that I do have some authority on is when it comes to addiction and trauma and assault. And there's a lot of sexual assault in addiction. I mean, many men have sexual assault and then somehow end up as drug addicts. And, it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg type thing. But if you're a woman and you're a drug addict, you're a lot closer to that stuff, and it's a lot more extreme. And see, this is what is interesting, is at least we as men need to understand about women who've had trauma, is that the healing process of this is going to have a part of a definition of defining what happened. Why did this happen? How did this happen? And again, if you're a woman looking for the answer, you're listening to the wrong podcast or whatever. But just as men, we need to understand this, is that there's this phase of when something traumatic happens to us is, one, we got to run from it. We got to get out of that pain. And this becomes a big obsession. How do we get out of it? How do we make it stop? All right, it didn't stop when it was happening to me, and it happened over and over again, and I can't imagine why it's not happening or why it's not stopping. How do I get to safety? Okay, how do I do it? Okay, it's not happening. How do I get out? And this can be run over and over again in our head. But then there's this point where we define it. We define it. Why did this happen? This is never going to happen again. I'm going to make sure that these things are prevented. And we move into this form of dealing with our pain in that. And it's normal. It's natural. And right now we're stuck in that. There's a lot of people who have had trauma. And again, I don't want to speak for you. It's my assumption. A lot of people who've had this trauma and we haven't gotten through that pain. And we become obsessed with this. I don't want it to happen again. And look, I'm on your side. I don't want bad things to happen again. I don't want certain things, especially when it comes down to sex and sexuality, to happen again. But when we move into this process of where we really get to know it, get past it, and start to heal from it in a place where we can see these traumatic things as events in our lives, stuff which stops having the impact that it had, stopped having the charge, is when we can start to internally fix that. And so there's this thing where the real solution of when we've gone through trauma is going to be healed when we can see it within ourselves. Like, I had this happen to me. I had this sexual assault happen to me. I had this thing robbed from me. I was brutally beaten in this way. I went through a feeling or a series of emotions that happened where it didn't stop, and it was terrible, and I feared for my life. And then I thought it was going to end, and then it didn't end, and it seems like it went forever. And we get to know that. And in a way, we accept that as a part of ourselves. This is easier said than done. Great concept, Steve, all these different things. But when we're dealing with trauma, ultimately, that's where we need to get. And when we get there, and we're always focused on it being a societal issue, we cannot focus on ourselves internally. We're always focused on this thing outside of ourselves. Whatever it is, when it comes to women and Me Too, it's the patriarchy, it's the stats, it's the whatever. But if you flip on another end to it, it's like, why did my dad lose his job and we grew up poor? It's because of Jimmy Carter. It's because of Ronald Reagan. It's because of this. It's because of the liberals. It's because of all this stuff outside of myself that we chase and chase and chase. But we have the information, we have the stats, we have somebody to blame, we have multiple people to blame, and we have something that's almost like an impossible war that it won't get solved. You see the same thing in men's rights. And so men, listen to this. I get it. You've been through divorce, rape. And it's interesting because a friend of mine just posted online about how men, how have you been raped and in what way? And I put the different ways that I've gone through sexual assault, and immediately it gets questioned, right? It gets questioned. And one of the things, and so I've had situations where it's like I've been passed out drunk or been on drugs and some bad things have happened. But what has really been one of the things that in what I wrote on, because she asked and she asked to describe, and I said, man, there were a couple times where I didn't want to have sex and the girl forced me to have sex. That's bullshit. How can that happen? I'm like, no, man, it's pretty bad. Like I didn't want to, and then I went through with it, and then all of a sudden I go through with it and, convince myself that I like it and so on. And it's like, and I wanted to tell her, I'm like, man, I've heard women say the same thing. And like, why can't I have a bad feeling about that? I get it. I don't feel that it's got to traumatize my life, but it sucked. It was bad sex. And you asked what these things were, that were against my will sexually. See, the thing is when we build a dialogue with people outside of ourselves, it becomes never ending. And so part of this solution of when we are in trauma and sex, it needs to be healed within ourselves. And what I see a lot of, and again, man, I don't know the whole thing. And I'll even say this, I think that men and women handle sexual assault in totally different ways. Men deal with the shame or trauma or all these different things about that in one way and women in another. But with men, I definitely understand it a little bit better. But when we are constantly in that pain and can't get out of it, we seek for things like social movements. Now, don't get me wrong. I think society needs to change. I think perspective from men and from women and with sex in general has to change, or else we're going to keep running into the same problems and they may even get worse before they get better. But how that happens is never something that needs to be so bad that we need to start hating people that we don't know, that we need to start judging them, that a woman needs to look at me and assume certain things about me, or because I'm sexually active in one way or think in a certain way that she is allowed to hate me. And the same thing goes for men, is that never should it be so bad that a man needs to start judging a woman without knowing her, without getting to know her, without the idea of two people facing each other and having the opportunity to get to know each other, that somehow that is diminished or trumped over their political beliefs or their different ideologies. And see, one of the things that is such a key point of everything that we do, everything, huge part of TSL, huge part of AMD, huge part of us being able to coach within what I do, within my systems, is us talking to people that we don't agree with. It's an exercise. Talk to somebody that you hate. Because behind that hate, behind all those different things, is going to be somebody's choice that they made that has worth to them. And I guarantee you we can relate with that worth. I guarantee you we can understand that. And one of those things, when I talk to somebody who's in that area, man, sometimes there's still a lot of pain there. And probably the best thing that we can do for that pain is not get caught up in a political argument, not get caught up in some whose side are we on type thing, but listen and care. Be a part of whatever their feeling is. And if we're face to face and if we're one-on-one, and part of that is anger, part of that is resentment, part of that is ranting, we ain't gonna get hurt too bad by listening to it. And I think about this because there's been so much tension that's built up in our world. There's so much anger. There's so much like people wanting to kill, people, suppressing their anger so much to the point where they want to explode and they have to erupt in front of other people and so on. And I remember when that whole Columbine thing happened, and people would always quote this, and they thought it was such a genius, beautiful thing. And I just thought it was like pretty much common sense, but they were interviewing people on what would have happened. And they asked Marilyn Manson, and he said, what would you tell them? They asked him, what would you tell those kids? And he said, I wouldn't tell them anything, I would have listened. The thing is that what we need to start doing when we talk to people is not talk at them, not trying to convince them, not to spread our ideology, not even to say how you're going to get better, But the best thing that we can do is talk to each other and listen. That's why I love this group, is because we can talk to each other and listen. Is we can talk to each other, we can hear what we say. It doesn't matter so much about our political beliefs, our past, or any of that stuff, but we can listen to where we're coming from. And when that happens, man, that is the best solution for trauma. See, humanity has never been without it. It has never been without extreme pain and extreme loss. Life is difficult. We got it easy now. But now when we feel pain, and legitimate pain, man, it ain't easy. Somehow it affects us in this way where it toxifies our entire life. Why didn't we have this so much before? I really think we should start with listening. Don't listen to a movement, listen to an individual. Have a relationship with a person in front of you that can make a choice and a decision about you. Don't have a relationship with a cause that you can't touch, that you can't feel, and that makes you hate another person when you don't know them. So hey guys, always a tough topic to talk about, but something that we need to talk about more, and we as men need to start looking to each other to find the solution, because so many men that I know are strong, that live it, that do it, that are able to make the most out of their lives despite massive adversity. So if you like this, check out the other videos. If you didn't like it, well, later. This is what I do. I talk about men's development. I talk about sex. Leave a comment down below. Build a discussion. I ain't down for shit talking. Definitely check out this playlist. And this video, and this video, and this video, or wherever we put them on the screen. And most importantly, don't go hiking in slippers when you step on snakes. That's a bad idea.